Millionaire abandons infertile wife and returns years later to find she's raised twins on her own. The November rain lashed against the windows of St. Mary's Elementary School as Veronica Anderson's heart stopped mid-beat. Through the sheets of water cascading down the glass, she saw Ethan standing across the street, watching their children on the playground. Her children. Not his. Never his. Her fingers gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white, mind racing back to that day 15 years ago when everything changed. Summer 2009. The U.S. Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. The chalk dust in the air, the familiar scent of leather and sweat, and 19-year-old Veronica Mitchell's dreams shattering along with her body as she fell from the uneven bars. One miscalculation, one moment of distraction, and her future splintered into fragments of what could have been. The doctor's words still echoed severe internal damage, unlikely to conceive alternative options. Now, in 2024, watching Ethan watch her children, those same words took on a different weight. Oliver's laughter carried across the playground as he helped Charlotte up after a stumble, their twin bond evident in the natural way they moved together. 4 years old and already inseparable, already everything their father had deemed impossible when he walked away. Mummy Charlotte's voice pierced through her memories. "You're early." Veronica forced her hands to relax, painted on the smile she'd perfected over years of society events and board meetings. "Surprise, sweetheart. I thought we could get hot chocolate before your swim lesson." As she helped the twins into their raincoats, she glanced back across the street. Ethan was gone, but his presence lingered like the storm clouds overhead. Back in the car, watching Oliver help Charlotte buckle her booster seat I can do it myself, Ollie, Veronica's phone buzzed with a text. "They're beautiful, Ronnie. Can we talk?" 4 years of silence, and now this. Her finger hovered over the delete button when another message appeared. The Golden Heart Center called. "Rachel reached out. We need to discuss this." The hot chocolate suddenly felt like a mistake. Rachel, the twins' birth mother, choosing now to make contact just as Ethan resurfaced. The universe, it seemed, had a cruel sense of timing. "Mummy, are you okay?" Oliver's concerned voice came from the back seat, so much like his father's it made her chest ache. "You look sad." "I'm perfect, baby," Veronica answered, meeting his worried gaze in the rearview mirror, "just thinking about how lucky I am to have you both." Charlotte, ever perceptive, piped up. "Was that man watching us your friend? The one in the fancy coat?" The question hung in the air like the storm clouds above, heavy with unspoken complications. How do you explain to 4-year-olds that the man watching them was the same one who'd declared them not good enough before they were even born? That he'd walked away from their mother because biology meant more to him than love? Instead, Veronica turned on their favorite playlist, letting Baby Shark fill the car with its mindless cheer. But her thoughts raced ahead to the complications looming on the horizon. Rachel's contact wasn't entirely unexpected. They'd discussed the possibility of open adoption from the beginning, but Ethan's return? That was a variable she hadn't planned for. As they pulled into their favorite cafe, Thunder Cat Coffee, where the barista Kevin always gave the twins extra whipped cream, Veronica's phone buzzed again. This time from Lauren, her sister Michelle saw him. "Want me to have him served with a restraining order?" The twins tumbled out of their car seats, already debating which cookies to choose. Their innocent excitement about such simple pleasures made Veronica's chest tight with fierce protectiveness. She'd rebuilt their world from the ashes of her broken dreams, crafted a family from choice, rather than obligation. Now, watching Oliver hold the door for his sister, she typed back a quick response. "Not yet, but keep the paperwork ready." The storm outside intensified, but inside Thundercat, surrounded by the warmth of coffee and her children's laughter, Veronica steeled herself for the battles ahead. She'd survived the fall that ended her Olympic dreams. She'd survived Ethan's betrayal. She'd built a life and family on her own terms. Whatever came next, she would face it with the same determination that had carried her through it all. But this time she wasn't alone. She had two little hearts depending on her to keep their world secure, and nothing, not Ethan, not Rachel, not society's judgments would shake the foundation she'd built. The twins' voices rose in friendly argument over cookie choices, and Veronica felt the familiar surge of love and purpose that had become her center. Let the storm come. She was ready. The old newspaper clipping, yellowed with age, still hung in Lauren's office. Mitchell eyes, Olympic gold. 19-year-old Veronica's confident smile beamed from the photograph, chalk dust coating her hands as she prepared for her uneven bars routine. The Boston Globe had called her America's Next Golden Girl, praising not just her athletic prowess but her determination to succeed despite her modest background. "You were unstoppable back then," Lauren mused, watching Veronica stare at the image. "Remember how Dad worked double shifts just to pay for your training?" Veronica traced the edge of the frame, remembering the scent of chalk and leather, the calluses that had permanently altered her palms. He never complained. Not once. Even when I'd practice until midnight in that tiny gym in South Boston. The memories flooded back: early morning training sessions, protein shakes for breakfast, calculus homework done between routines. Her coach, Sarah Thompson, drilling the same sequences until perfection became muscle memory. "Higher, Veronica, straighter. You're not here to be good, you're here to be legendary." Then came Harvard and the chance meeting that changed everything. Ethan Anderson, the ambitious law student who'd wandered into the university gym late one night looking for a quiet place to study. He'd found Veronica instead, practicing her routines despite the university's prohibition on unsupervised gymnastics training. "You're either very dedicated or very reckless," he'd said, not reporting her but staying to spot her routines instead. Their love story had unfolded like a fairy tale, the Olympic hopeful and the future corporate lawyer, both driven by dreams bigger than their backgrounds. Ethan understood her hunger for success because he shared it. His father, a tough-as-nails construction worker, had drilled into him the importance of rising above one's circumstances. "We'll build something extraordinary together," he'd promised, holding her hand as they walked through Boston Common, planning their future. No compromises, no settling for second best. Those early years had been intoxicating. While Veronica trained for Olympic qualifiers, Ethan clerked at Boston's top law firms. They'd meet at midnight in all-night diners, sharing dreams over coffee and pie. He never missed a competition, sitting in the front row with a bouquet of white roses, her lucky flower. Even after the accident, when her Olympic dreams shattered along with several vertebrae, Ethan had remained steadfast. "This isn't the end," he'd whispered in her hospital room. "It's just a different beginning." He'd been right, in a way. Unable to return to gymnastics, Veronica had channeled her discipline into business school. Together they'd climbed Boston's social ladder, charity galas, board positions, summer houses in Martha's Vineyard. By 30, they were the perfect power couple, she running her own consulting firm, he making partner at his law firm. "Remember what Mum said at your wedding?" Lauren asked, pulling Veronica back to the present, "that you two were proof that love conquers all." Veronica's laugh held no humor. "Funny how life proves our parents wrong." The photograph caught the sunlight, highlighting the determination in young Veronica's eyes. That same determination had carried her through physical therapy, through building her business, through the years of fertility treatments that followed. Ethan had been there for all of it, until he wasn't. "You know what I miss most about that time?" Veronica asked, finally turning away from the image of her younger self. "The certainty. The absolute belief that if you worked hard enough, wanted something badly enough, you could make it happen." Lauren squeezed her sister's shoulder. "You still have that certainty. I see it every time you're with the twins." Outside Lauren's office window, Boston's financial district gleamed in the autumn sunshine, a world away from the chalk-dusted gym where two young people once believed love could conquer anything. The woman Veronica had become barely resembled that hopeful gymnast, but perhaps that was the point. Life had taught her that sometimes the best victories come from learning to release the bar and trust in your own strength to land safely. The morning routine in the Anderson household ran like a well-choreographed ballet, albeit one where the dancers occasionally spilled cereal and forgot their shoes. Veronica moved through their Cambridge townhouse with practiced efficiency, multitasking between client emails and Charlotte's missing hair ribbon. "Mom." Oliver's hogging the bathroom again, Charlotte's voice carried from upstairs, followed by the familiar sound of twin negotiations through the bathroom door. "2 minutes, Charlie. I'm fixing my tie." Oliver's muffled response held the serious tone he'd recently adopted, insisting on wearing clip-on ties to match the business attire he'd seen in old photos of his mother's consulting firm. Veronica smiled despite her mounting to-do list. At 4, Oliver already showed signs of her perfectionist streak, while Charlotte approached life with an artist's beautiful chaos. They were perfect opposites, yet completely in sync, like two stars orbiting the same center. The facade of their life looked flawless: successful single mother, thriving twins, beautiful home. The reality lived in the quiet moments between Instagram posts and PTA meetings. It lived in Oliver's nighttime anxiety, requiring exactly 3 bedtime stories and his special dinosaur nightlight. It lived in Charlotte's questions about why their family photos didn't match her friends. Where other children had daddies, they had Aunt Lauren and Auntie Michelle's frequent visits. Breakfast in 5 minutes. Veronica called upstairs, scanning the morning's headlines on her tablet. The Boston Business Journal had featured her firm again, Anderson Consulting, redefining work-life balance in corporate America. The irony wasn't lost on her. The twins thundered downstairs, Oliver in his miniature tie and Charlotte with mismatched socks she insisted were artistic choice. "Mommy." They settled into their usual breakfast routine, Oliver methodically arranging his fruit in rainbow order, Charlotte creating stories with her toast soldiers. "MS?" Peterson asked about family tree projects today, Charlotte mentioned casually, dunking a toast soldier in her egg. "Can I put Rachel on mine?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Veronica had always been open about adoption with the twins, but Rachel's recent contact request added new complexity to these conversations. "Of course, sweetheart." "Rachel is part of your story." Veronica kept her voice steady, years of boardroom negotiations serving her well. "We can talk about how you'd like to represent that." Oliver looked up from his perfectly arranged fruit. "Can we put the nice man with the dinosaur blanket too?" The nice man, Ethan's recent reappearance through small gestures like the comfort blanket during Oliver's fever, complicated their carefully balanced world. His attempts at connection, always respectful and distant, still sent ripples through their routine. "Let's focus on our immediate family for now," Veronica suggested, catching sight of the time. "Shoes on in 5 minutes." As she helped Charlotte fix her sock situation and checked Oliver's backpack for the 3rd time, Veronica caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. At 37, she looked polished, professional, every inch the successful businesswoman. Only her closest friends saw the costs: the midnight work sessions after the twins slept, the careful budgeting despite her firm's success, the dating life sacrificed to maintain their delicate family balance. The morning carpool arrived, another single mom with whom Veronica traded school drop-off duties. Through the window she watched Oliver help Charlotte with her backpack, their twin bond evident in the unconscious synchronicity of their movements. They were more than enough, this family they'd built from choice rather than chance. Her phone buzzed a text from Ethan about the upcoming school science fair, followed by one from Rachel asking about sharing childhood medical history. The perfect morning routine trembled at the edges, like a gymnast holding a difficult pose. But Veronica had learned that perfection wasn't about never wobbling, it was about finding your balance after each shake. She watched her children climb into the carpool van, matching lunchboxes swinging, and reminded herself some routines look messy to outsiders but contain their own perfect logic. Michelle's corner office overlooked Boston Harbor, but today the prestigious view served only as backdrop to an emergency support council. Lauren paced the length of the floor-to-ceiling windows while Michelle reviewed documentation on her laptop, both women in full protection mode. "He's been watching them at school," Lauren fumed, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors. "We could file for a restraining order by end of business today." Michelle, still in her court attire, shook her head. "Legally, he hasn't done anything threatening. Standing on public property, sending respectful texts. Any judge would throw it out." The Single Mothers of Beacon Hill group text buzzed simultaneously on both their phones. Sarah Thompson, their resident childcare coordinator, had already mobilized the network coverage for V's twins sorted through next week. "Jackie takes swimming lessons, Beth handles karate, I've got science fair prep." This was the invisible infrastructure Veronica had built around her family professional women who understood that sometimes it took a village, especially when that village wore power suits and carried legal degrees. "Remember when we thought we'd lost her?" Lauren sank into a leather chair, the memory still raw. "After Ethan left, when she wouldn't leave the house." Michelle nodded, remembering those dark days, until Mrs. Peterson from next door showed up with that casserole and her own divorce story. Turned out half the neighborhood was either divorced, widowed, or single by choice. The support network had grown organically. First, Mrs. Peterson's weekly dinners, where single mothers shared childcare tips and job leads. Then Sarah, a former Olympic coach turned tech executive, started the neighborhood childcare rotation. Beth, a pediatrician, offered medical advice during playground meetups. "V's not alone this time," Michelle said firmly, closing her laptop. "She has us, the neighborhood network, her firm's backing." And Rachel Lauren added thoughtfully, "Don't forget Rachel's been surprisingly supportive through all this." The mention of the twins' birth mother added another layer to their already complex support system. Rachel's recent contact had initially sparked concern, but her respectful approach and genuine interest in the twins' well-being had slowly earned her a place in their extended family circle. Lauren's phone chimed with a text from Veronica twins asking about family tree project. "Need backup for weekend craft session." "Copy that," Lauren replied. "I'll bring the glitter glue. Michelle's on snack duty." Michelle raised an eyebrow. "Bold of you to volunteer me." "You still owe us for missing Charlie's dance recital for that merger meeting." Their easy banter masked deeper commitments. Every woman in their network understood the unspoken contract: show up, step up, no questions asked. Whether it was emergency childcare, professional advice, or just a shoulder to cry on, the system worked because everyone contributed what they could. Outside Michelle's office, Boston's financial district hummed with end-of-day energy. Somewhere in that urban landscape, Ethan Anderson might be watching their makeshift family, perhaps finally understanding what he'd walked away from. But the women in this office knew better than most family wasn't about who left, but who stayed. "Should we warn the others?" Lauren asked. "About Ethan being back?" Michelle was already typing in their secure group chat, "Heads up, ladies. Former situation resurfacing. Standard protocols in effect." Within minutes, responses flooded in offers of support, extra vigilance during school pickups, and at least 3 invitations for wine nights. This was their strength, not just the individual support they provided Veronica, but the network they'd built together, stronger than any traditional family structure. 4 years earlier, the Anderson estate had felt like a mausoleum on that rainy November evening. Veronica stood in their master bathroom staring at the 3rd negative pregnancy test that month when her phone buzzed with an incoming email. The sender's name caught her eye: Jessica Wells, Ethan's new legal secretary. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Anderson. You deserve to know." Attached were screenshots of text messages and hotel reservations. As Veronica scrolled through them, her world tilted on its axis. The timestamps painted a devastating picture. While she'd been undergoing fertility treatments, Ethan had been building a different future entirely. "Baby, this changes everything," one message read. "Jessica's pregnant. It's like a sign from the universe." The irony was bitter enough to choke on. Downstairs, she heard the familiar sound of Ethan's key in the door. His footsteps on the marble floors echoed through their perfect home, the home they'd spent 11 years building together. "Ronnie," his voice carried upstairs. "Dr. Morrison's office called the firm today." She descended the stairs slowly, foam clutched in her hand like a weapon. Ethan stood in their living room, Boston's skyline creating a dramatic backdrop through the floor-to-ceiling windows. At 38, he carried success like a second skin, his bespoke suit and carefully styled hair presenting the image of a man who controlled his destiny. How long? Veronica's voice was steady, surprising even herself. What confusion crossed his face, then understanding as she held up her phone. The color drained from his features. "Ronnie, I can explain." "How long?" 6 months. He loosened his tie, a nervous gesture she'd once found endearing. It wasn't planned, it just happened. Like our fertility treatments just happened. Like the specialist appointments you insisted I keep taking. Each word felt like glass in her throat. "While you were building your backup plan." "That's not fair." Fair, the laugh that escaped her held no humor. "You want to talk about fair, Ethan? I have spent the last year letting doctors pump me full of hormones, tracking my cycle like it's a full-time job, crying over negative tests, while you've been starting another family." His silence spoke volumes. Outside, the Boston traffic continued its endless flow, oblivious to the destruction happening 30 stories above. "She's 3 months along," he finally said, as if that explained everything. A boy. The tests confirmed it last week. The timing hit her like a physical blow. Last week, when he'd held her after another failed treatment, promising they'd find a way through this together. "Get out," the words came from somewhere deep inside her, somewhere beyond pain. "Ronnie, please, we need to discuss this rationally. The house, our assets." "Your lawyer can talk to mine." She turned away, unable to look at him anymore. "I'm sure Jessica can recommend someone, given her position at the firm." "I never meant to hurt you." His voice cracked slightly. "You have to believe that." "What I believe," Veronica said slowly, "is that you're a coward, Ethan. You couldn't handle the possibility of not having a biological child, so instead of being honest, you created a backup plan. Tell me, was Jessica a calculated choice? A young, fertile replacement?" His silence answered everything. The next moments passed in a blur, Ethan packing a bag, making promises about fair settlements and generous alimony. Veronica stood at their bedroom window, watching the city lights blur through her tears, wondering how 11 years of marriage could end with such a whimper. Only later, alone in their empty house, did she allow herself to break. The irony of it all, that after years of fertility struggles, Ethan had so easily created the family he wanted with someone else, felt like the universe's cruelest joke. The weeks following Ethan's departure blurred together in a haze of legal meetings and pitying looks. Veronica found herself avoiding the places that had once defined their life together, the country club where they'd spent Sunday brunches, the high-end restaurants where maitre d' still greeted her as Mrs. Anderson, the charity boards where whispers followed her like perfume. "Did you hear?" "Jessica's expecting." "Yes," Ethan's secretary. "No, apparently Veronica couldn't." The shame felt cellular, as if her body's failure had somehow invited this betrayal. She caught herself studying her reflection in mirrors and windows, wondering if she could spot the defect that had cost her everything. Was it written in the slight lines around her eyes? The way her hands trembled when someone mentioned children? "You need to eat," Lauren insisted, barging into the Anderson estate one morning with grocery bags and determination. She found Veronica in her home office, surrounded by fertility clinic bills and divorce paperwork. "And you need to get out of this mausoleum." "I have work," Veronica gestured vaguely at her laptop, where emails from concerned clients piled up unanswered. "You have depression," Lauren countered, pulling open the heavy drapes, "and the whole of Boston society watching to see if you'll crumble or rise." That was the crux of it. In their world, divorce wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was a spectator sport. Every decision, from which house she'd keep to whether she'd return to her maiden name, would be analyzed and judged. The gossip reached her in fragments. She focused too much on her career. Should have tried harder with the treatments. Always knew Ethan would want a proper family. The worst came at Margaret Wellington's annual Christmas gala, an event Veronica attended only because 3 major clients would be present. She overheard 2 women in the powder room, their voices carrying over the sound of running water. Well, what did she expect? A man like Ethan needs an heir. It's practically medieval, darling, but these old Boston families care about such things. "I heard she knew about her condition before they married. Rather unfair to him, don't you think?" Veronica stepped out of the stall, her presence silencing the room. She washed her hands with deliberate care, reapplied her lipstick, and met their shocked gazes in the mirror. "Ladies," she nodded, her voice steady, "do give my best to your husbands. I believe they both have meetings with my firm next week about their quarterly reports." But alone in her car afterward, the tears came. Not for Ethan, not anymore, but for the woman she'd been, the one who believed love could conquer biology, who thought 11 years of marriage meant more than the ability to produce an heir. Her phone buzzed, another message from the fertility clinic, offering to continue her treatments as a single woman. The idea twisted something inside her. All those years of hoping, praying, injecting herself with hormones. Had it ever been about having a child, or just proving she wasn't broken? Lauren found her later that night, sitting in what would have been the nursery. They'd painted it sage green years ago, gender-neutral and hopeful. "I keep thinking," Veronica said into the darkness, "about all the time I wasted trying to be enough. For Ethan, for society, for some mythical child that was never meant to be mine." "You were always enough," Lauren's voice was fierce. "The problem was never you." But the words, well-meaning as they were, couldn't erase years of internalized shame. Every baby shower she'd smiled through, every pregnancy announcement she'd celebrated, every well-meaning question about when she and Ethan would start a family, they had all left marks, invisible but deep. Society had a script for women like her: retreat gracefully, perhaps throw yourself into charity work, become the elegant, childless aunt who travels the world. But something in Veronica rebelled against this prescribed path of elegant disappointment. She was tired of being the woman things happened to. It was time to become the woman who made things happen. The Golden Heart Adoption Center stood like a beacon against the January sky, its red brick facade warm despite the winter chill. Veronica sat in her car, gripping a folder of perfectly prepared documentation, financial statements, character references, home study preparations. 3 months after Ethan's departure, she'd made a decision that shocked Boston society. She would become a single mother by choice. "You're sure about this?" Michelle had asked, reviewing the legal implications. "Single-parent adoption isn't easy, especially in your position. Every aspect of your life will be scrutinized." Veronica was beyond caring about scrutiny. The whispers about Jessica's growing baby bump, the pitying glances at charity events, the careful way people avoided mentioning Ethan's name, all of it had hardened her resolve. Inside the center, Patricia Wilson's office felt worlds away from the marble and mahogany of corporate Boston. Family photos covered the walls, each one telling a story of love transcending biology. "Single-parent adoption is challenging," Patricia began, reviewing Veronica's file, "but your financial stability and support system are impressive." However, I need to ask, are you doing this to prove something to your ex-husband? The question stung with its accuracy. Maybe initially, Veronica admitted. But not anymore. I've spent years letting other people define what family means to me. I'm ready to define it for myself. Patricia's expression softened. That's exactly what I needed to hear. Because we have a situation that might interest you. She pulled out a file, explaining about newborn twins left at the center's door the previous night. Their mother, young, scared, but determined to give them a better life, had left a heartbreaking note. Twins. Veronica's heart stuttered. But that's twice the challenge, twice the scrutiny. Twice the love, Patricia corrected gently. Would you like to meet them? The nursery was quiet except for soft breathing and the hum of a humidifier. Two tiny bundles, barely a day old, lay side by side in their hospital-issued bassinets. A boy and a girl, their futures as blank as the generic name cards on their cribs. They'll need to stay in observation for another week, Patricia explained. Time for you to prepare if you're interested. Veronica approached cautiously. The boy's tiny fist was curled against his cheek, while his sister made gentle sucking motions in her sleep. Something shifted in the universe, like puzzle pieces clicking into place. Can I hold them? The moment the twins settled into her arms, Veronica understood what all those years of fertility treatments had been preparing her for. Not for a biological child, but for these two precious souls who needed exactly what she had to give: unconditional love without genetic strings attached. "Hello, little ones," she whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I've been waiting my whole life for you." The challenges ahead loomed large: single parenthood, society's judgment, the logistics of raising twins alone. The boy grasped her finger with surprising strength while his sister nuzzled closer, as if already knowing they were home. The process isn't simple, Patricia cautioned, as a single mother taking on twins. "Nothing worth having ever is," Veronica interrupted, her voice firm with certainty. These children deserved a mother who would fight for them, who understood that family wasn't about matching DNA, but about choosing each other every day. The first time Veronica met Rachel, it wasn't at the adoption center, but in the unlikely setting of Massachusetts General Hospital's cafeteria. 3 months before the twins' arrival, while finalizing her adoption paperwork, Veronica had taken a wrong turn looking for Patricia's temporary office and found herself facing a young woman with haunted eyes and bruised wrists. "Are you okay?" The question slipped out before Veronica could stop herself. Social niceties had taught her to ignore such things, but something in the girl's posture spoke to her. Rachel, though Veronica didn't know her name, then startled like a frightened deer. "I'm fine," she answered automatically, pulling her sleeves down. "Just got lost looking for the social services office." What a coincidence, Veronica smiled, recognizing a fellow soul in need of direction. "I'm lost too. Maybe we could help each other." They found their way together through the hospital's maze of corridors, making small talk that carefully avoided the obvious questions. Rachel couldn't have been more than 19, her pregnancy visible beneath her oversized sweater. The bruises on her wrists told a story neither of them acknowledged. "Do you want to grab a coffee?" Veronica offered when they finally located their respective destinations. "The cafeteria here makes surprisingly decent lattes." Over hospital coffee and packaged cookies, fragments of Rachel's story emerged. A relationship turned violent, a pregnancy discovered too late, a desperate escape from a small town in Maine. She'd chosen Boston because it was big enough to get lost in, far enough to feel safe. "I want them to have better," Rachel confessed, hands protectively cradling her bump. "They deserve a chance I can't give them." Veronica's heart skipped. "Twins," Rachel smiled sadly. "Found out last week. Makes everything more complicated." That afternoon stretched into evening, two women from different worlds finding common ground in their fears and hopes. Veronica spoke about her own journey, the fertility struggles, Ethan's betrayal, her decision to pursue adoption. "You're brave," Rachel said suddenly. "Choosing to be a mother on your own terms." "So are you," Veronica replied. "Choosing what's best for your babies, even when it breaks your heart." They parted with an awkward hug and exchanged phone numbers they both knew they wouldn't use. Some connections weren't meant to last, just to serve as bridges to the next chapter. 2 weeks later, Patricia called Veronica about twins left at the center. Reading the birth mother's note, Veronica recognized Rachel's careful handwriting. "Please give them to someone who will love them for exactly who they are, not who anyone wants them to be." Now, 4 years later, standing in her kitchen watching the twins build a precarious tower of breakfast cereals, Veronica often thought about that hospital cafeteria meeting. The universe had orchestrated a perfect collision of souls, each woman giving the other exactly what they needed: Rachel, a chance at motherhood; Veronica, the courage to redefine family on her own terms. "Mummy, look," Charlotte's voice pulled her from her memories. "We made it taller than Oliver's head." "Very impressive, sweetheart," Veronica smiled, catching Oliver's eye roll at his sister's excitement. They had Rachel's artistic spirit and determination, traits Veronica had recognized in that hospital cafeteria. Her phone buzzed with Rachel's latest message about making contact. The timing, coinciding with Ethan's return, felt like another cosmic orchestration. Perhaps the universe wasn't finished weaving their stories together. "Can we have pancakes?" Oliver asked, already losing interest in the cereal tower. "Please," Charlotte added, their twin powers of persuasion in full force. Looking at their hopeful faces, Veronica saw echoes of that scared young woman in the hospital cafeteria, choosing love over fear. Some choices she'd learned rippled through time, creating patterns of connection no one could predict. Thundercat Coffee buzzed with its usual morning energy when Veronica spotted Ethan through the window. He sat at a corner table, looking smaller somehow in casual clothes instead of his usual power suits. The dinosaur book he'd mentioned in his text sat wrapped on the table, along with Oliver's forgotten notebook. "You could still turn around," Michelle whispered beside her. "We can get coffee somewhere else." But Oliver's careful drawings deserved retrieval, and Veronica had stopped running from difficult moments 4 years ago. The bell above the door announced their arrival, causing Ethan to look up with carefully controlled hope. "I brought backup," Veronica said by way of greeting, nodding toward Michelle. But I'd expect nothing less. Ethan's smile was hesitant. "The notebook's here, and I hope it's okay. I got Oliver the dinosaur encyclopedia he was looking at last week." The gesture was so carefully thought out, so mindful of boundaries while still showing attention to detail, it made Veronica's practiced defenses wobble slightly. "You've been watching them," she said, not a question but not quite an accusation. From a respectful distance, he acknowledged. "I see them at the park sometimes, or here when they come for hot chocolate. They're extraordinary, Ronnie. The Ronnie. The way Oliver takes care of Charlotte, how she makes him laugh." "Stop," Veronica's voice cracked slightly. "You don't get to admire them from afar like some proud uncle. You walked away from the very idea of them." Michelle shifted closer, a silent reminder of support, but Ethan's next words froze them both. "I know about Rachel reaching out," he said quietly. "Patricia called me as your emergency contact was never updated." The implications hit like dominoes: Patricia's call, Ethan's return, Rachel's timing. "Is that why you're back? To complicate things just when they're getting more complicated?" "I'm back because seeing you with them in that magazine article woke me up. 4 years of therapy helped me understand what I threw away. Not just you, but the chance at real family, one built on love instead of biology." Kevin, the barista, approached with their usual orders. He'd started making them when he saw them enter. The normalcy of steaming milk and clinking cups provided a strange counterpoint to the conversation's gravity. "The twins ask about you," Veronica admitted, surprising herself. "The nice man who notices things. Oliver showed everyone his dinosaur blanket at school." Hope flickered across Ethan's face. "I want to do this right, Veronica. No pressure, no demands, just present, if you'll allow it, especially now with Rachel. It's too much, Michelle interjected. The twins don't need this confusion. But Veronica was watching Ethan's hands, the way they shook slightly as he pushed Oliver's notebook across the table. The man who'd left her would have been smooth, confident, certain of his welcome back. This Ethan seemed broken and rebuilt, like a bone that had healed stronger at the break. They have a science fair next week, she found herself saying. Oliver's doing a project on fossil formation. Charlotte's helping with the art. I remember science fairs, Ethan said softly. My father never came to mine, called them a waste of time. The admission hung between them, heavy with implication. The Ethan she'd known never spoke about his father's failures. This doesn't mean anything. Veronica picked up the notebook and gift. But if you're serious about doing this right, about respecting boundaries. I am. The intensity in his voice matched the one she'd fallen in love with years ago, but tempered now with humility. Whatever terms you set, whatever pace you choose. Outside, Boston traffic created a steady backbeat to their conversation. Through the window, Veronica could see the park where the twins played after school, where their unique version of family had taken root and flourished. Adding new elements to that careful ecosystem felt dangerous, but perhaps necessary. I'll think about it, she said finally. That's all I can offer right now. The monthly meeting of the Single Parents Support Network filled Mrs. Peterson's living room with the familiar chaos of children playing upstairs while adults gathered below. What had started as informal coffee meetings between neighbors had evolved into a crucial support system for dozens of families across Beacon Hill and Cambridge. So both of them are back? Sarah Thompson asked, her coach's analytical mind already mapping out potential scenarios. Ethan and Rachel at the same time. Veronica nodded, watching through the window as Oliver and Charlotte played tag with the other children in Mrs. Peterson's carefully tended backyard. The twins had blossomed in this environment, surrounded by children from similar family structures. Rachel's request seemed straightforward enough. Beth, their resident pediatrician, offered medical history, occasional updates. But Ethan's return could complicate everything. Mrs. Peterson finished, passing around her famous lemon bars. At 72, she'd become the group's unofficial grandmother, her own experience as a single mother in the 1970s providing valuable perspective. The network had rallied immediately upon hearing of Ethan's return. Schedule adjustments were made, ensuring the twins were never without trusted supervision during school pickup. Extra playdates were arranged to maintain their routine. Even Kevin at Thundercat Coffee had been subtly informed to alert Michelle if Ethan's visits seemed too frequent. The twins need stability, Jackie, a child psychologist, reminded them. But they also need truth, presented appropriately. They're at an age where they're starting to notice family differences. Charlotte's voice drifted through the open window, explaining to another child about her special family with lots of bonus grown-ups who love us. The simple wisdom of children often cut through adult complications. We've created something beautiful here, Veronica said, watching the children play. A community where different family structures are normal, celebrated even. I don't want anything to disrupt that. The group nodded in understanding. They'd all contributed to this tapestry: Mrs. Peterson's Sunday dinners, Beth's medical advice, Sarah's sports training, Jackie's child development insights. Even the teenagers of single parents had gotten involved, creating a babysitting network that provided both childcare and mentorship. Whatever you decide about Ethan and Rachel, Mrs. Peterson said, patting Veronica's hand, remember you're not deciding alone. These children have a whole village behind them. As if to prove her point, Oliver appeared at the back door, knee scraped from a fall. Before Veronica could move, Beth was already reaching for her first aid kit, while Sarah distracted Charlotte from worrying about her brother. The seamless coordination spoke of years of practice, of understanding that parenting didn't have to be a solo endeavor. Better, Beth asked. applying a dinosaur band-aid to Oliver's knee. "Can I have two?" he asked hopefully. "One for Charlie too, so we match." The simple request embodied everything their community stood for: the natural empathy and connection they'd fostered in their children. "You've built more than a support system," Jackie observed quietly. "You've created a model for what modern family can look like." Looking around at these women who had become her lifeline, Veronica felt a surge of certainty. Whatever came next with Ethan and Rachel, her children would face it surrounded by love in all its forms. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, bearing the letterhead of Boston's most prestigious fertility clinic. Veronica almost discarded it with the junk mail, assuming it was another outdated promotional message. But the handwritten note inside changed everything. "Dear Mrs. Anderson, during our recent system upgrade, we discovered information that may be pertinent to your previous treatments. Please contact Dr. Morrison's office urgently regarding test results from 2020. Her hands trembled as she dialed the familiar number. 4 years had passed since she'd last sat in Dr. Morrison's office, listening to explanations about her supposed infertility. The receptionist connected her immediately, unusual for the busy practice. "Mrs. Anderson," Dr. Morrison's voice carried the weight of professional regret. "We've uncovered a significant error in your original diagnosis." The words that followed blurred together: mix-up in lab results, actually your husband's fertility issues, completely reversible condition. The room seemed to spin as the implications settled in. "Are you saying," Veronica steadied herself against the kitchen counter, "all this time?" "The fertility issues weren't yours, Mrs. Anderson. They were Mr. Anderson's. A treatable condition that he was made aware of during his private consultation." The revelation hit like a physical blow. Ethan had known. Before the treatments, before Jessica, before walking away, he had known the truth. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Can we talk? It's important." Another from Rachel: "Need to discuss something about the twins' medical history." And finally an email from Jessica: "Ethan's former secretary, you deserve to know the whole truth." The timing couldn't be coincidental. Veronica's investigative instincts, honed through years of corporate consulting, kicked in. She called Michelle. "Pull every record you can find," she instructed. "Medical files, corporate documents, everything from 2020. Within hours, Michelle had assembled a devastating timeline. Ethan had received his diagnosis 3 months before leaving. Jessica's pregnancy had never existed. She'd been paid to play a role, to provide Ethan with an excuse to leave that wouldn't damage his corporate image. The golden boy heir couldn't admit to fertility issues. Michelle's voice dripped with disgust, so he manufactured a scandal he could control. But something still didn't add up. Why was Rachel choosing this moment to discuss medical history? Why was Jessica breaking her silence now? The answer arrived in the evening paper. Anderson Associates announces merger with global investment firm. The deal would make Ethan one of the most powerful financial figures in Boston if it went through. The board votes next week, Lauren explained, scanning the article. They're big on family values, traditional structures. A man who abandoned his infertile wife wouldn't play well. But a man who returned to make amends, Veronica's laugh, held no humor, who reconciled with his adoptive family. That's a much better story. The pieces aligned with cruel clarity. Ethan's careful approaches, the thoughtful gifts for the twins, the public appearances at their usual spots, all orchestrated to create a narrative of redemption just in time for the merger announcement. Her phone rang again. Patricia from the adoption center. "Veronica, I've just had a concerning call from Rachel. She says she's being pressured to restrict contact with the twins." The final piece clicked into place. Someone was trying to tidy up all the loose ends of Ethan's story, creating the perfect picture of family reconciliation while erasing the messier truths. Veronica looked out at the backyard where the twins played, blissfully unaware of the adult complications swirling around them. They deserved better than to be props in someone else's redemption story. "Michelle," she said quietly, "how would you like to help me destroy my ex-husband's merger?" The war room assembled in Michelle's office looked more like a command center. Lauren had covered one wall with a timeline of Ethan's deceptions, while Michelle's legal team worked through stacks of documents. The merger announcement had shifted everything, turning their personal drama into a corporate chess game. "We have three options," Michelle outlined, her lawyer's precision cutting through the emotional haze. "One, we expose everything: the false diagnosis, Jessica's payoff, the pressure on Rachel. It kills the merger but drags the twins into public scrutiny." Veronica watched Boston's lights flicker on as dusk settled. Somewhere out there, Oliver and Charlotte were at their weekly swimming lesson, protected for now in their bubble of childhood innocence. "Option 2, Lauren continued, "we negotiate. Use what we know to force Ethan to back off completely. He gets his merger, we get guaranteed privacy and security for the twins." "And option 3, Veronica asked, though she suspected she knew. "We do nothing," Michelle said quietly. "Let him have his perfect redemption story. Sometimes peace comes at the cost of justice." The choice seemed impossible. Expose the truth and risk hurting the twins, negotiate with a manipulator, or swallow another injustice for the sake of peace. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Peterson. "Oliver helped Charlotte with her goggles today. Said he didn't want her to be scared of the deep end like last time." The simple message crystallized something. "What happens to the other families?" she asked suddenly. "What do you mean?" Lauren looked up from her notes. "If this merger goes through, if Ethan becomes more powerful in Boston's financial world, what happens to all the single parents who depend on loans from his bank, the small businesses in our support network, the adoption center's funding?" The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Ethan's company controlled significant portions of Boston's financial infrastructure. His traditional family values could impact countless non-traditional families. "But there's another way," Veronica said slowly, "but it means using everything he taught me against him." She outlined her plan. Instead of exposing Ethan's deceptions, they would use his own strategy. Build a better story. One about community, about different kinds of strength, about family that transcends biology and traditional structures. "The merger board wants family values." Veronica's smile held steel. "Let's show them what modern family values really look like." But the plan came with its own moral complications. It meant putting their community in the spotlight, asking other single parents to share their stories, turning their private support network into a public statement. "Are we any better than him if we use the children as symbols?" Lauren voiced the concern they all felt. Veronica stared at the photo on her phone's lock screen, the twins at last month's community picnic, surrounded by their chosen family of strong women and supported children. "The difference is, we're not hiding who we are," she said finally. "We're not pretending to be something we're not for corporate approval. We're showing that family can look different and still be whole." The decision would change everything. Their quiet support network would become a movement. The twins would eventually learn the complicated truth about their father. The peaceful life they'd built would face public scrutiny. Her phone buzzed again. "Rachel," this time, received another call, pressuring me to sign away contact rights. "What should I do?" The answer came with surprising clarity. "Tell everyone we're having an emergency network meeting," Veronica instructed Lauren. "Not just our usual group, everyone. Single parents, adoptive families, everyone who's part of our extended community." "You sure about this?" Michelle asked, already reaching for her phone. "No," Veronica admitted, "but I'm sure about one thing: I won't let anyone shame us into silence again. Not Ethan, not corporate boards, not society's outdated expectations." Mrs. Peterson's living room had never been so crowded. What started as their usual support network had expanded to include families from across Boston: single mothers, adoptive parents, blended families. each with their own story of redefining what family means. "They're trying to pressure all of us," a mother from South Boston shared. "My mortgage application was mysteriously delayed after I refused to add my ex-husband as a co-signer." The after-school program lost its funding, another added, right after they started advertising themselves as alternative family-friendly. Rachel sat quietly in the corner, her hands wrapped around a cooling mug of tea. At 23, she looked both younger and older than her age, carrying the weight of recent pressures with remarkable grace. "He offered me money," she finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper, "to sign away all rights to contact, said it would be better for everyone." The room erupted in protective anger, but Veronica watched the twins through the window, playing with other children in the backyard. Oliver was showing a younger boy how to build a proper sandcastle, while Charlotte organized some sort of elaborate game involving leaves and imagination. "Whatever we do," she addressed the room, "has to protect all our children. Not just mine. Every child who needs to know their family is real and valid, no matter what it looks like." Sarah Thompson, the former Olympic coach, stood up. "My gym program serves mostly single-parent kids. We've been offered a significant donation to change our scheduling to traditional family hours." The pattern emerged: subtle pressures, financial leverage, social manipulation, all aimed at reshaping their community into something more palatable for corporate interests. "We can't fight a multinational merger," someone pointed out. "No," Michelle agreed, "but we can change the narrative, make it impossible for them to ignore us." The plan took shape organically. Each family would document their story. The small businesses would track the pattern of financial pressure. The community organizations would gather data on how many families they really served. "It's not just about stopping Ethan's merger," Veronica explained. "It's about making sure no one can ever again claim that families like ours are somehow less than." But the consequences rippled outward. Several parents worried about job security if they spoke out. Others feared social backlash. The children, always perceptive, began asking questions about why there were so many meetings, so many worried adult conversations. "Mummy, are we in trouble?" Charlotte asked that evening, as Veronica tucked her into bed. "No, sweetheart. We're just reminding some people that all families are special, even when they're different. Like how Oliver and I don't have a daddy, but we have all our aunties." Charlotte's innocent observation caught at Veronica's heart. Exactly like that. The next day, the first consequences of their resistance appeared. The local paper ran a small article about family values concerns in Boston's financial sector. Ethan's PR team released a statement about traditional family structures being better for children's development. But for every attempt to diminish them, their community grew stronger. The story was bigger than Veronica now. It had become about every family fighting for recognition, every parent choosing love over convention, every child growing up knowing they were enough exactly as they were. The first strike came through Thundercat Coffee. Kevin called early one morning, his voice tight with concern. "Mrs. Anderson, they're buying the building. All the tenants are being given 30 days to vacate." Thundercat wasn't just their morning coffee spot, it was where the support network held informal meetings, where the children gathered after school, where their community had grown strong. Its loss would cut the heart out of their neighborhood. But that was just the beginning. Within days, a pattern emerged. Businesses friendly to their cause faced sudden health inspections, tax audits, licensing reviews. Mrs. Peterson received notice that her home daycare license needed immediate review. Sarah's gym lost its insurance coverage without explanation. "It's systematic," Michelle observed, tracking the incidents on her office whiteboard. "They're dismantling our support structure piece by piece." But then came the personal attacks. A folder appeared on Veronica's desk at work, photographs of the twins at school, at swimming lessons, at the park. Nothing threatening, just a reminder that they were being watched. The message was clear: back off, or the scrutiny would intensify. "We should go to the police," Lauren insisted. with what Veronica spread the photos across Michelle's conference table. Everything's legal, technically. But the worst blow came from an unexpected direction. Patricia called from Golden Heart, her voice shaking. The center's primary funding is being reviewed. They're questioning our single-parent adoption policies. The implications were staggering. Not just for them, but for every future family that might find each other through Golden Heart. How many children would be denied loving homes because they didn't fit someone's narrow definition of family? Veronica found herself in the center's parking lot, gripping her steering wheel as memories flooded back, meeting the twins, those first precious moments of connection, the way Oliver and Charlotte had felt like missing pieces of her heart, finally clicking into place. Her phone buzzed, Ethan requesting a meeting. Just as his message read, "No lawyers, for the twins' sake." She almost laughed at his audacity. The twins' sake? After he'd orchestrated this campaign of subtle terror? But then Oliver's teacher called. "Mrs. Anderson? Oliver had a bit of a breakdown today. Some children were asking why there are photographers outside the school." They'd brought their fight to the school. Veronica found herself driving to the one place she never expected to seek refuge, her old house in Beacon Hill, now owned by Jessica, Ethan's former secretary. The woman who'd been paid to lie about a pregnancy, who'd helped orchestrate Veronica's public humiliation. Jessica opened the door looking nothing like the polished secretary she'd once been. 4 years had softened her, or perhaps it was the guilt. "I've been waiting for you," Jessica said simply, stepping aside to let Veronica in. "There's something you need to see." In Jessica's home office, a wall of documents told a story bigger than their personal drama. Financial records, corporate emails, board meeting minutes, a paper trail showing how Ethan's merger was just one piece of a larger plan to reshape Boston's social landscape. "They're calling it the Family Values Initiative," Jessica explained. "Using financial pressure to enforce traditional family structures. The merger would give them control over most of the city's small business lending." "Why are you showing me this?" Jessica's smile held no humor. "Because 4 years ago I helped destroy something beautiful for a paycheck. I'd like to sleep at night again." Veronica stared at the evidence of conspiracy laid bare. They'd thought they were fighting one man's redemption story. Instead, they'd stumbled into a systematic attempt to erase families like hers from existence. Her phone buzzed again, Lauren sending a photo of the twins safe at home, playing with their toy dinosaurs, blissfully unaware of the storm surrounding them. Everything in Veronica wanted to retreat to protect her children from this ugliness. But looking at Jessica's wall of evidence, she understood sometimes the greatest protection comes from fighting the bigger battle. The Harvard Square playground felt like neutral territory for her meeting with Ethan. The twins were safe at home with Lauren, but their presence lingered in the empty swings and dinosaur-themed climbing frame they loved so much. "You look tired," Ethan observed, settling onto the bench beside her. "Orchestrating systematic harassment will do that to a person," Veronica replied, watching a group of children play nearby. "Or being on the receiving end of it." "It's not harassment, Ronnie, it's business. The merger." Don't her voice cut like steel. "Don't pretend this is just business. You're trying to erase us. Not just me and the twins, but every family that doesn't fit your corporate image." A young single mother walked past, gently guiding her toddler. Veronica recognized her from their support group, another parent whose daycare had mysteriously lost its license. "The board has concerns," Ethan said carefully, "about the stability of non-traditional family structures, the impact on children. Like the impact of having photographers outside their school, of watching their community get torn apart." The playground had emptied now, leaving them alone with their fractured history. In the distance, Thundercat Coffee's going out of business sign caught the late afternoon sun. "I can protect them," Ethan offered quietly, You, the twins, your immediate circle, just step back from this campaign. Let the merger proceed. The offer hung between them, tempting in its simplicity. Protection for her children, security for their future. All it would cost was everyone else's chance at the same happiness. Her phone buzzed Rachel, sending a video of Oliver from last week's science fair, proudly explaining his fossil project. Then another message from Patricia: 3 more adoption applications from single parents had been withdrawn under pressure. "You know what Oliver did yesterday?" Veronica asked, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "He gave his favorite dinosaur book to Tommy, Sarah's son, because Tommy's mum couldn't afford new books after losing her gym program." She turned to face Ethan fully, seeing not the polished executive but the scared boy who'd learned that family love was conditional. "That's what you're trying to destroy. Not just different family structures, but the compassion and community we've built." "The world isn't that simple," Ethan argued. "Children need stability, traditional structures. Children need love," Veronica interrupted. "They need community. They need to see that family comes in all forms." Her phone buzzed again, Michelle sending documents from Jessica's wall. Evidence of the larger conspiracy, proof that this went beyond one merger. "You have a choice here," Veronica stood, brushing playground dust from her slacks. "You can be the man who tried to erase families like ours from existence, or you can remember what it felt like to be a child believing love had to be earned through perfection." "Don't make this personal," Ethan's voice held a warning. "It became personal the moment you put photographers outside our children's school." As she turned to leave, Ethan called after her, "They were never our children, Ronnie. That's the point." The words were meant to wound, but they strengthened her resolve. She thought of Oliver's gentle way with younger kids, Charlotte's fierce protection of those she loved, traits they'd learned not from biology, but from being part of a community that valued all forms of family. Her phone lit up with messages from their network, offers of help, words of encouragement, promises of support. Each message a reminder that while Ethan had corporate power, she had something stronger, a community built on love rather than obligation. Walking away from the playground, Veronica made a decision. If they wanted a war over family values, she would show them what real family values looked like. Not in corporate boardrooms or legal documents, but in the daily acts of love and support that had built their community. The revelation came from an unexpected source. Charlotte's bedtime routine usually involved stories about princesses and dinosaurs, an unusual combination she insisted worked perfectly, but tonight she had questions. "Mummy, Tommy at school said his daddy used to be nice too before the men in suits came." Veronica paused in the middle of braiding Charlotte's hair. "What men in suits, sweetheart?" "The ones who made his daddy's store close. Like Kevin's coffee shop." Charlotte hugged her stuffed elephant closer. "Are they going to make us close too?" The innocent question contained a devastating observation. Tommy's father owned a small bookstore that had recently lost its lease, another casualty of the merger's ripple effects. But more importantly, Tommy's father had been on Ethan's side of the conflict until the pressure tactics affected his own family. "No one's going to make us close," baby Veronica assured her daughter, but her mind was racing. Later that night, after both twins were asleep, Veronica called Michelle. "How many?" she asked without preamble. "How many of Ethan's supporters have switched sides after experiencing the pressure tactics themselves?" Michelle's keyboard clicked in the background. "At least 7 local business owners in the past week. The tactics are getting sloppy, affecting their own people." "They're overreaching," Veronica realized. "Getting careless." A text from Jessica confirmed her suspicion. Board members asking questions about aggressive tactics. Some have family members affected by their own policies. But it was a small crack in their opposition's armor, but it revealed something crucial. The more widely they cast their net of intimidation, the more they risked alienating their own support base. The next morning, Veronica arrived at Oliver's school early, watching the parents during drop-off. She noticed things she'd missed before: the quiet conversations between parents who used to be on opposite sides of the conflict, the shared looks of concern, the way former adversaries now stood together against a common threat. Mrs. Anderson, it was Tommy's father, looking uncomfortable in his casual clothes, so different from his former corporate attire. "Got a minute?" They walked to what used to be his bookstore, now empty except for a few abandoned shelves. Through the window she could see Thunder Cat Coffee across the street, Kevin supervising the removal of their beloved espresso machine. "I was wrong," he said simply, "about everything. About what makes a family, about what children need." He handed her a USB drive. "These are internal communications about the pressure campaign. Use them." Back in her car, Veronica studied the familiar streets of their neighborhood. Every closed shop, every altered routine, every scared parent, they were all threads in a larger tapestry of community under siege. But in those same streets she saw something else: people coming together, barriers breaking down, unlikely alliances forming. Her phone buzzed with a message from Rachel: "More parents from the adoption center want to speak out. They're not afraid anymore." Another small piece clicked into place. The very pressure meant to silence them was creating a louder chorus of voices. Every act of intimidation sparked new conversations about family, community, and what really mattered. The call came at 3 a.m., the kind of call that changes everything. Mrs. Peterson had suffered a heart attack. The cornerstone of their community, the woman who had turned her home into a sanctuary for countless single-parent families, was in critical condition at Massachusetts General. Veronica found herself in the hospital waiting room, surrounded by members of their network. Lauren had the twins, who still slept peacefully, unaware that their beloved Grandma Peterson might never again serve them her famous chocolate chip cookies. It was the stress, Sarah whispered, clutching a cold cup of hospital coffee. The licensing reviews, the constant questions, the threats to her home daycare program. She wouldn't let anyone help her fight it. The cardiac unit's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on tired faces. Every person in that waiting room had a story about how Mrs. Peterson had helped them through their darkest moments. The emergency babysitting when work ran late, or holiday dinners for those without family, the quiet wisdom shared over cups of tea in her kitchen. "She was supposed to host the science fair meeting tomorrow," Jackie said softly. "Said she'd had enough of them trying to bully us out of our own neighborhood." Dawn crept through the hospital windows as they waited for news. Veronica's phone buzzed constantly: messages from community members, updates about the ongoing pressure campaign, meeting reminders for their resistance efforts. But for the first time since the conflict began, none of it seemed important. The doctor's arrival silenced the room. Mrs. Peterson had survived, but barely. The stress had indeed been a factor. She would need weeks of recovery, and her home daycare program, the heart of their support system, would have to close indefinitely. "I'll take over," Sarah offered immediately. "We can move the daycare to my gym." "Your gym that lost its insurance," Michelle reminded her gently. Reality crashed back like a wave. Every backup plan, every alternative they suggested, ran into the wall of systematic pressure their opponents had built. They were watching their safety net unravel thread by thread. Back home, Veronica found Oliver and Charlotte awake, full of questions about their missing morning routine. "Why can't we go to Grandma Peterson's today?" Charlotte asked, her lower lip trembling. "She's not feeling well, sweetheart. She needs to rest." "Is it because of the mean people?" Oliver's question cut straight to the heart. "The ones who made Kevin close the coffee shop?" Veronica gathered them close, breathing in the scent of their shampoo, feeling the steady beat of their hearts against hers. How do you explain to children that sometimes fighting for what's right comes with painful costs? Her phone buzzed again. "Ethan, this time I heard about Mrs. Peterson. This wasn't supposed to happen. Can we talk?" "Then Rachel, the adoption center's funding review is tomorrow. They're saying they'll prioritize traditional family structures." The walls were closing in. Mrs. Peterson's illness had revealed their vulnerability. Without her home as a gathering point, without her quiet strength holding their community together, how long could they resist? But looking at her children's worried faces, Veronica felt something shift inside her. Mrs. Peterson hadn't built this community by backing down from bullies. She'd built it by opening her heart and her home, by choosing love over fear every single day. "How about we make Grandma Peterson some get-well cards," Veronica suggested, reaching for the craft supplies. "And maybe we can bring cookies to everyone who's sad today." As the twins threw themselves into their artistic mission, Veronica sent out a group message: "Meeting at my house tonight. It's time we stop playing defense." Mrs. Peterson had given them more than just a gathering place. She'd shown them how to be a family, not just for themselves, but for an entire community. Now it was their turn to prove they'd learned her lessons well. The community meeting in Veronica's living room felt different without Mrs. Peterson's steadying presence. Parents sat on every available surface, children played quietly upstairs, and the weight of decisions hung heavy in the air. "We have an offer," Michelle announced, her professional facade cracking slightly. "The merger board is willing to negotiate. They'll restore funding to the adoption center, reinstate business licenses, and leave our community alone." "What's the catch?" Sarah asked, though everyone already knew. "They want us to make a public statement," Michelle continued, "supporting traditional family values, acknowledging that children do better in two-parent households," and she hesitated, looking at Veronica. "They want the twins to spend supervised visitation time with Ethan, for appearances." The room erupted in angry whispers. Veronica felt the weight of every eye on her, waiting for her response. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rachel: "Whatever you decide, I'm with you, but the adoption center can't keep fighting much longer." "How many families would this affect?" Veronica asked quietly. "The adoption center serves over 200 families annually," Patricia supplied, "plus the small businesses, the support programs." "And how many future families?" Jackie added. "How many children might never find homes if they change the adoption policies?" The math was brutal in its simplicity: sacrifice her family's privacy, allow Ethan's narrative to prevail, in exchange for protecting hundreds of other families. The twins would have to participate in a charade, but other children would have homes. "We can't let them win like this," Lauren argued. "The minute we admit they're right about traditional families being better, we invalidate everything we've built." "But if we don't," Sarah countered, "we lose everything anyway. My gym's already down to half its students. Tommy's dad is selling his bookstore inventory from his garage. How long can we last?" Upstairs, they could hear Charlotte teaching the younger children a song she'd made up about dinosaurs and friendship. Oliver's voice joined in, carefully helping a smaller child with the words. Their innocent joy felt like a rebuke to the adult compromises being discussed below. "There's another option," Jessica spoke up from her corner. She'd been attending their meetings lately, her insider knowledge proving invaluable. "The board members aren't united. Some of them have family members affected by their own policies. If we can delay the merger vote by 2 weeks. 2 weeks won't change anything," someone objected. "It will if we use that time to show them exactly what they're destroying," Veronica said slowly, an idea forming. "Not with protests or legal challenges, but by letting them see what real family looks like." The plan that emerged was either brilliant or desperate: invite the board members' families to experience their community, not as observers but as participants, show them the strength of single mothers, the love in adoptive families, the power of chosen family bonds. "It's risky," Michelle warned. "If it fails, we lose our last chance at negotiation." "And if it works?" Rachel asked. "Then we change minds instead of just policies," Veronica answered. "But it means opening ourselves up completely. No more protecting our privacy, no more shielding the children from this fight." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They would have to trust their opponent's humanity, believe that seeing real families in action could overcome corporate ideology. More importantly, they would have to trust their children's resilience. The twins already understand more than we think, Sarah offered gently. They see us fighting for them, for each other. Maybe it's time we let them be part of the solution. Veronica thought of Mrs. Peterson in her hospital bed, of all the sacrifices that had built their community. Sometimes the bravest choice wasn't fighting or surrendering, but opening your heart wider when everything in you wanted to close it. 2 weeks, she announced. Let's show them what family really means. The first board member's family arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Charlotte was hosting her weekly dinosaur tea party, a tradition that had started as her way of helping younger children feel less scared about their changing families. Oliver, taking his role as co-host seriously, carefully explained the difference between herbivores and carnivores to a wide-eyed 5-year-old. The plant eaters sit together, he explained patiently, because they're peaceful. Like how Tommy's dad and my mum can be friends even though they disagree sometimes. The board member's wife, Margaret Hamilton, watching from the doorway, pressed her hand to her mouth. Her own grandson had recently been displaced by a messy divorce, left feeling untethered in the adult chaos. He hasn't smiled like that in months, she whispered, watching her grandson join the dinosaur sorting. We tried everything, therapists, expensive toys. Sometimes children just need to feel part of something bigger than their problems, Veronica offered quietly. That's what we do here. We create spaces where every kind of family belongs. Throughout the week, more families came. They saw Sarah teaching a special gymnastics class for children with anxiety, using movement to help them process their emotions. They watched Tommy's father run his makeshift bookstore from his garage, creating a reading circle where children shared stories about different types of families. Even Rachel participated, sharing her story with other birth mothers who struggled with their decisions. Her quiet strength, her clear love for the twins, and her respectful place in their extended family challenged every assumption about adoption and family bonds. Mrs. Peterson, still recovering but determined to contribute, hosted small gatherings in her hospital room. Children made get-well cards, parents shared concerns, and the steady stream of visitors demonstrated how deeply she had touched their community. I used to think family was about bloodlines and legal documents, one board member confessed over coffee at Veronica's house. But watching my niece here, seeing her bloom among all these different family structures. The most powerful moments were often the smallest. Oliver sharing his precious dinosaur book with a new friend. Charlotte organizing the younger children to make welcome cards for every new visitor. The natural way the community absorbed and supported each newcomer, regardless of their connection to the conflict. Even Ethan, watching from the periphery, seemed affected. He attended one of the community dinners now held in various homes since Mrs. Peterson's house was unavailable. The sight of his polished corporate facade cracking as he watched the twins lead their dinosaur parade through the living room suggested something shifting in his understanding. They're extraordinary, he said to Veronica afterward. Not despite their unconventional family, but because of it. On the final evening before the board vote, their community gathered in the hospital's garden. Mrs. Peterson had been allowed a brief outing, and the children performed a special dinosaur-themed play. They'd created a story about different types of dinosaurs learning to be family despite their differences. Watching the performance, seeing the faces of board members' families mixed with their own, Veronica realized they'd already won something precious. Whatever the vote's outcome, they had shown their children that love creates family, that community can weather any storm, and that sometimes the bravest act is opening your heart to former adversaries. The morning of the board vote dawned with unexpected news. Jessica arrived at Veronica's house before sunrise, clutching a leather portfolio and looking like she hadn't slept. There's more, she said, spreading documents across the kitchen counter while the twins slept upstairs. The Family Values Initiative wasn't Ethan's idea. He was following orders. The portfolio contained emails dating back 5 years, long before Ethan had left Veronica. Communications between board members outlined a long-term strategy reshape Boston's social landscape by controlling its financial infrastructure. Traditional families would receive preferential treatment for loans, housing, and business opportunities. Everyone else would be gradually squeezed out. But they chose Ethan because of us, Jessica explained, her voice hollow. Our fertility struggles made us perfect test subjects. If they could pressure someone like you successful, respected, from an old Boston family into conforming, then no one would dare resist, Veronica finished, the pieces clicking into place. But there was more. A second file revealed something even more shocking. Ethan had initially refused. The emails showed his resistance, his arguments for family diversity, his defense of their marriage despite their inability to have biological children. Until they threatened everything. They would have destroyed your consulting firm, Jessica pointed to a particularly damning email. Blocked your clients, cancelled your contracts. They knew your independence mattered more to you than money. So he left instead, Veronica whispered. Made himself the villain to protect me. He thought he was choosing the lesser evil, Jessica admitted. Better for you to hate him than to lose everything you'd built. The revelation should have changed everything. But as Veronica heard Oliver and Charlotte stirring upstairs, their morning giggles echoing through the house, she realized it changed nothing. Ethan's noble intentions didn't erase 4 years of absence, didn't justify his recent attempts to manipulate their children for corporate approval. Her phone buzzed with messages, Michelle confirming their legal strategy, Lauren reporting on protest preparations outside the board meeting, Rachel announcing another birth mother had come forward to share her story. There's one more thing, Jessica hesitated. The board members who visited our community this past week, their families are revolting, threatening to expose decades of similar manipulations in other cities. A text from Ethan appeared. We need to talk. Before the vote. The twins thundered downstairs, Oliver clutching his favorite dinosaur book, Charlotte wearing her future scientist t-shirt backward, their innocent enthusiasm for another day of community activities oblivious to the adult drama swirling around them crystallized something in Veronica's mind. Send everything to Michelle, she instructed Jessica, but hold off on releasing it. Why? This could stop the merger immediately. Veronica watched her children set up their breakfast routine, Oliver carefully arranging fruit in rainbow patterns, Charlotte creating stories with her toast soldiers. Every morning for 4 years, they'd performed this dance of domestic harmony, proof that family could thrive in unexpected forms. Because this isn't about Ethan anymore, she realized. Or about the merger. It's about every family that doesn't fit their perfect mold. We need to win this on our own terms. Jessica studied her with new understanding. You're protecting him, after everything. I'm protecting the truth, Veronica corrected. That real family, whatever shape it takes, is worth fighting for, even when it's messy, even when it hurts. Her phone buzzed again, Mrs. Peterson being discharged early, insisting on attending the board meeting. The community rallying one last time, not for revenge or vindication, but for the simple right to exist as they were. The board meeting was scheduled for noon, but Veronica agreed to meet Ethan at Thundercat Coffee one final time. Kevin had delayed the shop's closure for this last morning, understanding the symbolism of where their story had both ended and begun. I tried to protect you, Ethan said without preamble, looking older than his years in the harsh morning light. Everything I did, every choice I made, was wrong, Veronica finished quietly. Noble intentions don't justify 4 years of absence. The twins deserved better. Our community deserved better. Through the window, she could see their supporters gathering. Single mothers pushing strollers, adoptive families holding handmade signs, small business owners standing shoulder to shoulder. Even some of the board members' families had joined them, wearing "Love Makes Family" buttons. I was a coward, Ethan admitted. Not for leaving, but for staying away. For watching from a distance as you built something beautiful from the ashes of what I destroyed. "That's not entirely true," Veronica found herself saying. "If you hadn't left, I might never have found the twins. Never helped build this community. Sometimes our worst moments lead us to our best destiny." The realization struck her like lightning. All these years she'd carried her infertility like a wound, Ethan's abandonment like a scar. But those very injuries had led her to her true purpose, creating spaces where every kind of love could flourish. "The board won't back down easily," Ethan warned. "Even with the families protesting, even with the evidence Jessica found." "They don't have to," Veronica smiled, understanding flooding her. "We've already won the real battle." Her phone lit up with pictures Oliver and Charlotte at the center of a group of children, teaching them their dinosaur family song. Mrs. Peterson in her wheelchair, surrounded by community members sharing stories of how she'd changed their lives. Rachel and other birth mothers forming a support circle, turning pain into purpose. "Look," she showed Ethan the photos. "Really look. This is what they can't stop. Not with money or pressure or corporate policies. This is real family values." For the first time since their divorce, she saw genuine tears in Ethan's eyes. "I'm resigning from the board," he said quietly. "After the vote, whatever happens. I can't be part of destroying something this precious." "It took you 4 years to see what I learned the day I held the twins," Veronica responded, not unkindly. "That family isn't about meeting someone else's standards. It's about choosing love every day in all its forms." Outside, the crowd had grown. Lauren arrived with the twins, who immediately began organizing the other children into what looked like a dinosaur-themed protest parade. Charlotte's backward t-shirt had somehow become a trend, with other kids deliberately wearing their clothes wrong in solidarity. "You know what Oliver said yesterday?" Veronica watched her son help a smaller child with a sign. "He said families are like his dinosaur books. There are lots of different kinds, but they're all interesting and important." "He's wiser than I ever was," Ethan admitted. Veronica gathered her things, preparing to join her community. "The board needs to understand something," she said. "They think this is about money and power, but we're fighting for something much bigger. We're fighting for every child who needs to know they're enough, exactly as they are." "And every parent?" Ethan asked softly. Yes, she realized. Every parent who's ever felt less than perfect. Every family that doesn't fit the mold. We're not just fighting against something anymore. We're fighting for something. For the right to love without conditions. As she walked out of Thundercat Coffee for the last time, Veronica felt the weight of years lifting from her shoulders. She wasn't broken, wasn't less than, wasn't a failure. She was exactly who she needed to be, not just for her children, but for an entire community of souls learning to redefine family on their own terms. But the boardroom at Anderson Associates looked exactly as Veronica remembered, all mahogany and masculine power, designed to intimidate. But today something was different. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the sound of children singing drifted up from the street below, where their community had gathered in peaceful protest. "This is highly irregular," Board Chairman William Sterling announced, glaring at the unprecedented scene in his meeting room. Mrs. Peterson sat in her wheelchair near the door, surrounded by other community members who'd been granted entrance as stakeholders. Rachel stood quietly beside Veronica, while Ethan took his usual seat at the board table, though his posture suggested he no longer belonged there. "What's irregular," Margaret Hamilton spoke up from the family section, "is how long we've allowed fear to dictate our definition of family." The room shifted uncomfortably. Several board members avoided looking at their own family members in the audience. The carefully orchestrated power dynamic was crumbling. "We have a fiduciary responsibility," Sterling began, but his daughter-in-law interrupted. "To whom?" she demanded. "The shareholders, or the communities we serve?" From the street below, Charlotte's voice rang out clear and sweet, leading another round of their dinosaur family song. The simple tune had become an anthem of sorts, its message of acceptance spread through playground networks across Boston. The merger vote requires unanimous approval, Sterling reminded them stiffly. And I see no reason to delay. I do. Ethan stood, straightening his tie one last time. I move to permanently table the merger discussion and propose instead a community investment initiative, starting with restoration of all cancelled funding. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Sterling's face turned an alarming shade of red. You can't. According to Article 7 of our Charter, Michelle spoke up from her legal observer position. Any board member can propose an alternate agenda item during a special session. More board members shifted uncomfortably, looking between their powerful chairman and their protesting family members. The old power structure was visibly fracturing. Mrs. Peterson wheeled herself forward. Before you vote, her voice carried the weight of decades of wisdom. Look out that window. That's not a protest you're seeing. That's a celebration of what family really means. Below, Oliver had organized the children into a dinosaur parade, each child holding a sign showing their unique family structure. Single parents, adoptive families, blended homes, extended communities, all moving together in joyful defiance of anyone who would call them less than perfect. The world is changing, Veronica addressed the board quietly. You can change with it, become part of something beautiful, or you can become obsolete, clinging to shadows of control. The vote, when it came, wasn't even close. Sterling and his old guard found themselves overwhelmed by a new vision of corporate responsibility, one that recognized the strength in diversity rather than fearing it. As the room cleared, Veronica caught Ethan's eye. He nodded once, a gesture of respect rather than familiarity, before leaving to tender his resignation. They would never be friends, exactly, but perhaps they could be something more important, examples of how people could grow, learn and change. Outside, the celebration had turned into an impromptu community festival. Kevin was serving his last batches of Thundercat coffee from a mobile cart, already planning his new location in a more supportive neighborhood. The children's dinosaur parade had evolved into a spontaneous street fair of acceptance and joy. 6 months after the board meeting, Thundercat Coffee reopened in a renovated brownstone just 2 blocks from its original location. The grand opening ceremony brought together their entire community, but with subtle changes that reflected their journey. Did you ever imagine this? Rachel asked, watching Oliver help Charlotte master the art of hot chocolate preparation behind the new counter. Kevin had designed a special kids barista program, teaching children the basics of running a business while building their confidence. Not in my wildest dreams, Veronica admitted, taking in the scene. The cafe's walls displayed photographs documenting their community's story, Mrs. Peterson's original support group meetings, the protest that became a celebration, quiet moments of different families supporting each other. A special corner honored the dinosaur revolution, as the children's movement had been dubbed by local media. But the most significant change wasn't in the physical space. It was in the conversations happening around them. I got approved for the small business loan, Tommy's father announced, joining them with coffee in hand. The new board's community investment program actually made it easier than the old system. Speaking of the board, Michelle appeared, legal files tucked under her arm. You need to see these, V. The full investigation results just came in. The documents revealed a pattern more complex than they'd imagined. The old guard's family values initiative hadn't just been about controlling family structures, it had been about maintaining power through isolation. By breaking down community bonds, they had hoped to make individuals more dependent on corporate approval. Look at these demographic studies, Michelle pointed out. They specifically targeted neighborhoods with strong community ties. Places like ours were considered threats to traditional authority structures. Because we proved people could thrive without their approval, Veronica realized. A commotion at the counter drew their attention. Charlotte had created a new drink she dubbed the family blend, a somewhat chaotic mixture of hot chocolate, whipped cream, and dinosaur-shaped sprinkles. To everyone's surprise, It was becoming the cafe's most popular order. Mommy Oliver called excitedly. Mr. Kevin says we can make it a regular menu item. The sight of her children thriving, unaware of how their simple authenticity had helped change their city's landscape, brought unexpected tears to Veronica's eyes. "There's something else," Rachel said quietly, pulling out her own envelope. "The adoption center asked me to share my story at their national conference. They want to use our experience to change policies across the country." The implications were staggering. What had started as a personal battle for their community's survival had sparked a larger conversation about the true meaning of family values. "Did you see this morning's paper?" Lauren joined them, spreading out the business section. The headline read, "Former Anderson Associates board member launches family diversity investment fund." Ethan's new venture, it seemed, was dedicated to supporting non-traditional families and community-based businesses. His quote in the article acknowledged his personal journey from enforcing traditional structures to understanding the strength of diversity. "He's actually doing it," Veronica murmured, surprised despite herself, "making amends in a real way." Through the cafe's windows, they could see Mrs. Peterson arriving for her daily visit, her wheelchair now pushed by a rotating schedule of community volunteers. Each day she held court at her special table, continuing to dispense wisdom and support to anyone who needed it. The bell above the door chimed as more families arrived, some traditional, some distinctly not, all equally welcome in this space they'd created together. The children's area buzzed with activity as Oliver led another dinosaur story time, while Charlotte explained her drink-making philosophy to fascinated adults. "You know what the real misunderstanding was," Veronica said finally, watching her community flourish. "They thought they could defeat us by dividing us. They never understood that real family, whatever shape it takes, only grows stronger under pressure." 1 year after the board meeting, Veronica found herself sitting in Patricia's office at Golden Heart, facing an unexpected decision. The center's conference room was filled with familiar faces: Rachel, Ethan, Michelle, and representatives from adoption centers across the country. "We'd like to use your story as a model," Patricia explained, spreading out proposals for a new national program. "A framework for inclusive adoption policies that recognize all forms of family support." "Including birth-parent involvement?" Rachel asked, her voice steady but her hands betraying nervousness as they twisted a paper clip. "And extended community participation," Patricia nodded. "What you've all created here, it's unprecedented. A child supported not just by parents, but by an entire network of caring adults." The twins' latest school photos sat on Patricia's desk, Oliver proudly displaying his junior paleontologist badge, Charlotte wearing her trademark backwards science shirt. Their smiles reflected the security of knowing they were loved, not just by one person, but by an entire community. "There are complications to consider," Michelle cautioned, ever the lawyer. "Privacy concerns, legal frameworks for non-traditional support systems, and personal boundaries," Veronica added, glancing at Ethan. His role had evolved over the past year. After resigning from the board, he dedicated himself to making genuine amends, not through grand gestures, but through consistent, respectful presence. He attended the twins' school events when invited, contributed to community initiatives without seeking credit, and most importantly, respected every boundary Veronica set. "I know my place," he said quietly, understanding her concern. "This isn't about reclaiming what I lost. It's about supporting what you've built." Rachel reached across the table, squeezing Veronica's hand. Their own relationship had deepened into something unique, not quite friendship, not quite family, but a shared commitment to the twins' well-being that transcended conventional labels. "Oliver asked me something interesting yesterday," Rachel shared. "He wanted to know if it was okay to love lots of different people in lots of different ways." "What did you tell him?" Patricia asked. "I told him that love isn't like a pie that gets smaller when you share it. It's like his dinosaur stories, there's always room for one more character." The wisdom of children, Veronica thought, often surpassed adult understanding. The twins had adapted to their expanding circle of support with remarkable grace, teaching the adults around them about unconditional acceptance. "If we do this," Veronica said slowly, "it has to be honest. Not some polished success story, but the real, messy truth. The failures along with the victories." "Including my failures," Ethan added. "Especially those." Patricia nodded, making notes. "That's exactly what makes it valuable. Real families aren't perfect, they're resilient." Outside the center's windows, Boston's skyline sparkled in the autumn sun. Somewhere out there, Oliver was at his paleontology club, Charlotte at her art class, both surrounded by friends from various family structures, all part of their extended community. "We should ask the children," Rachel suggested. "Not just Oliver and Charlotte, but all the kids in our network. They're the ones who showed us how to do this right." The idea resonated. Their children had been the true architects of their community, building bridges between families with the simple acceptance that adults often struggled to achieve. "One condition," Veronica stated firmly. "Any family that participates in this program gets full community support. Not just guidelines and policies, but real, practical help." Like Mrs. Peterson's dinner schedule, Patricia smiled. Like everything. The small business network, the childcare co-op, the skills exchange program. Real family values aren't just about structure, they're about creating sustainable support systems. The meeting continued, planning and adjusting, but something had shifted. They weren't just rebuilding relationships, they were creating a new model of family support, one that acknowledged the complexity and beauty of human connections. On a crisp October morning, the community gathered at Mrs. Peterson's newly renovated home for what had become their monthly family circle breakfast. The house, once nearly lost to corporate pressure, now stood as a symbol of their resilience, its mortgage paid off by the community investment fund Ethan had established. "Did you see the latest application numbers?" Mrs. Peterson asked, presiding over her famous pancake breakfast. 20 new families joined our network last month alone." The living room buzzed with activity. Children darted between adults, sharing toys and stories. Oliver had set up his dinosaur museum in one corner, seriously explaining fossilization to a mixed group of parents and kids. Charlotte, wearing her signature backwards shirt, was teaching younger children her special pancake decorating technique. "It's different now," Rachel observed, watching the scene. "Not just surviving, but actually thriving." The changes were subtle but significant. Where once they'd fought for acceptance, they now found themselves becoming the model others sought to emulate. Traditional families began attending their events, drawn by the warmth and support they offered. The boundaries between different family structures had begun to blur, replaced by a simple question: does this child feel loved and supported? "Tommy's dad is getting married next month," Lauren announced, joining them with a fresh stack of pancakes. "He asked if the community would help plan the ceremony. Says his fiancée fell in love with our whole extended family." Veronica watched as Oliver helped a younger child reach the syrup bottle, while Charlotte organized an impromptu story circle. Their natural instinct to nurture and include others had spread throughout their network, creating a ripple effect of acceptance. "You know what Charlotte told her class during Family Week?" Rachel smiled. "She said she has the biggest family in Boston, because family isn't about who you're born to, it's about who you choose to love." The wisdom of children had become their guiding principle. Through all the legal battles and policy changes, it was the simple acceptance children showed each other that truly transformed their community. Even Ethan, who now attended community events as a respectful supporter rather than an active participant, had found his place in their expanded definition of family. He contributed without expecting recognition, learned to give without demanding return, and most importantly accepted that sometimes love means stepping back. "We're writing a new story," Mrs. Peterson said, surveying her full house with satisfaction. "Not just for ourselves, but for every family that doesn't fit the traditional mold." The morning sunlight streamed through windows that had once nearly been boarded up, illuminating a scene that would have seemed impossible 2 years ago. Single parents sharing childcare strategies with traditional families, adoptive parents exchanging tips with birth parents, children moving seamlessly between different family groups, all bound together by choice rather than obligation. Mummy Charlotte called from her pancake station. We invented a new recipe. It's called community cake because everyone added something special. The resulting creation was chaotic, but somehow perfect: chocolate chips from one family, banana slices from another, a sprinkle of cinnamon, a dash of vanilla. Like their community itself, it shouldn't have worked, but somehow it created something beautiful. 2 years after the board meeting that changed everything, Thundercat Coffee hosted a different kind of gathering. The cafe had become more than just a business. It was the heartbeat of their community, its walls now covered with photographs documenting their journey. But today's meeting carried special significance. The National Adoption Council wants to implement our model nationwide, Patricia announced to the assembled group, but they have concerns about long-term sustainability. Veronica watched Oliver and Charlotte manning their special kids counter, where they taught other children the art of community building through hot chocolate at 6. They had grown into confident, compassionate children who saw nothing unusual about their expansive definition of family. What exactly are their concerns? Michelle asked, legal pad ready. They worry about maintaining boundaries over time, Patricia explained, about what happens when children grow older and start asking more complex questions. As if on cue, Oliver approached their table, his expression serious. Mummy, Tommy said his dad told him that sometimes grown-ups who leave can come back different. Like how his dad came back better after being away. Is that why Mr. Ethan comes to our events now? Because he came back different? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Rachel squeezed Veronica's hand under the table, while Mrs. Peterson leaned forward in her chair, alert to the delicate moment. Sometimes, sweetheart, Veronica began carefully, grown-ups make mistakes because they're scared or confused, and sometimes if they work very hard to understand their mistakes, they can learn to be better. Like how I helped Charlotte when she was scared of swimming, Oliver asked. I was scared too, but I got brave to help her. Similar to that, yes, Veronica smiled, marveling at her son's intuitive understanding. Being brave isn't about never being scared. It's about doing the right thing, even when you are scared. The answer seemed to satisfy Oliver, who returned to his duties at the counter, but his question had opened a door they couldn't close. This is what the council needs to understand, Rachel said softly. We're not just creating a support system, we're building a framework for honest conversations about complex emotions. Lauren, who had been quietly observing, added, and what happens when other questions come? About birth parents, about absent fathers, about why some families look different from others. The cafe buzzed with its usual morning activity, but the questions seemed to hover in the air. Through the window they could see Ethan walking past, heading to his new office where he managed the community investment fund. He waved at the children, but didn't enter, maintaining the respectful distance he'd learned to keep. Maybe that's the point, Veronica said slowly, watching Charlotte teach a younger child her special hot chocolate recipe. Maybe we're not supposed to have all the answers. Maybe what we're really teaching is how to ask questions with compassion, how to seek understanding instead of judgment. Mrs. Peterson nodded approvingly. When I started hosting single mother dinners 30 years ago, people said it wouldn't last, that children need traditional structures to thrive. But look at what we've created, not just support, but a whole new way of understanding family. Yet even as they celebrated their success, new challenges emerged. How would their community model adapt as children grew into teenagers? How would they handle dating among single parents within the network? What happened when support systems developed romantic connections? The questions multiplied like ripples in a pond, each answered question revealing new ones beneath. But watching her children confidently navigate their unique world Veronica realized something crucial. Perhaps the questions themselves were the point. Spring brought unexpected changes to their community. The National Family Alliance had named Boston Support Network as a model program, bringing both validation and new challenges. Reporters began showing up at Thundercat Coffee, hoping to document what they called the community experiment. "They're missing the point," Veronica told Michelle as they watched Charlotte give yet another television crew her famous backwards shirt tour of the kids' counter. "This isn't an experiment, it's just life." The twins had handled the attention with surprising grace, but the increased scrutiny revealed unresolved complexities. During a community dinner, Oliver had asked the question they'd all been avoiding. "If our family is special because we choose each other," he'd said, carefully arranging his dinosaurs by species, "does that mean Mr. Ethan chose not to be our family before?" The question exposed the raw edges they still carried. Despite 2 years of careful relationship building, some wounds refused simple healing. Ethan, who'd overheard the question, had excused himself quietly from the dinner, his face tight with old regret. Sometimes Rachel had answered when everyone else hesitated, "Grown-ups make choices based on fear instead of love. And sometimes it takes them a long time to learn better." Later that night, as Veronica tucked the twins into bed, Charlotte had offered her own insight. Maybe Mr. Ethan needed to learn about dinosaurs first. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Well," Charlotte explained, hugging her stuffed stegosaurus, "Oliver says dinosaurs lived in all kinds of families, some in big herds, some just with their moms. But they were all still dinosaurs, right?" The wisdom of children never ceased to amaze. Yet their community's growth remained incomplete. Sarah's gym still struggled with insurance companies questioning their family membership policies. The adoption center faced resistance from traditional agencies uncomfortable with their open support model. Even their successes carried complications. When Tommy's father married his new wife, the ceremony had become a celebration of blended families, but also highlighted the complex emotions of children navigating changing family structures. "We're not perfect," Mrs. Peterson admitted during one of their planning meetings, "but perhaps that's our real strength. We're showing that families can be messy and beautiful at the same time." The truth of this played out daily in small moments, Rachel tearing up at the twins' school performances while trying to maintain appropriate boundaries, Ethan learning to celebrate their achievements without claiming parental rights. The community navigating the delicate balance between support and interference. One afternoon, Veronica found Oliver comforting a new child at Thundercat Coffee. The boy's parents were divorcing, and he felt lost in the changing dynamics of his family. "It's okay to be sad," Oliver told him, sharing his precious dinosaur book. "But you know what's cool? Now you can have an even bigger family, like me. See this picture? Different dinosaurs lived together and protected each other, even though they weren't the same species." The moment captured both their progress and their ongoing challenges. They'd created something remarkable, but it wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was a continuous journey of learning, adapting, and growing. Maybe that's the real lesson, Veronica told Rachel later. "We're not trying to create perfect families. We're learning to embrace the imperfect ones we have." Outside, Boston's spring sunshine illuminated their ever-evolving community. Children from various family structures played together in Thundercat's small garden, while adults navigated the complex choreography of shared support and respected boundaries. On the 5th anniversary of the twins' adoption, Thundercat Coffee hosted a celebration that no one could have predicted years ago. The cafe buzzed with an eclectic mix of people, adoptive families, single parents, traditional couples, birth parents, and community supporters, all brought together by a journey that had started with one woman's decision to redefine family. "Look what Charlotte made," Rachel called, holding up a drawing. The picture showed a complex web of interconnected hearts, each labeled with names from their community. At the center, written in her distinctive backward style, were the words "Love makes family." Oliver, now setting up what he called his Evolution of Family dinosaur display, had added his own scientific twist: different species can make one herd. The wisdom of children had guided them from the beginning, but today brought a new revelation. As Veronica watched the gathering, she noticed something remarkable. The lines between different types of families had become almost invisible. Children moved freely between groups, adults shared parenting tips across traditional boundaries, and support flowed naturally wherever it was needed. Ethan, who now served on the board of several family support organizations, arrived with an unexpected announcement. "The National Family Rights Council has officially endorsed our community model," he said, placing a folder on the counter. "They want to implement similar programs nationwide." But the real triumph wasn't in official endorsements or national recognition. It was in the small moments. Mrs. Peterson teaching a young single mother her secret pancake recipe, Tommy's stepmother organizing a support group for blended families, Kevin training a new generation of kid baristas to continue their tradition of community building through hot chocolate. "You know what's funny?" Michelle mused, watching the scene. "We spend so much time fighting for acceptance, we didn't realize we were creating something entirely new." The twins had inadvertently become ambassadors of this new understanding. Their natural ability to see family in all its forms had influenced their entire school, spreading ripples of acceptance through playground conversations and afternoon playdates. Mummy Charlotte called from her art station, "Can we make our family tree into a forest instead? Because it has too many branches for just one tree." The simple request captured everything they'd learned. Family wasn't a single tree with straight branches, it was a forest of interconnected lives, growing together, supporting each other through storms and sunshine. As the celebration continued, Veronica found herself standing between Rachel and Ethan, watching Oliver explain his dinosaur family theories to an enthralled audience of children and adults. The three of them, birth mother, former husband, and adoptive mother, represented every complication and possibility in modern family structures. "We did good," Rachel said softly, watching the twins thrive in their unique world. "You did good," Ethan corrected, understanding his place in their story. Veronica looked around at their gathered community, at all the lives touched and changed by their journey. "We all did good," she realized, "because we stopped trying to fit love into predetermined shapes." Outside, Boston's skyline caught the setting sun, casting long shadows across their neighborhood. But inside Thunder Cat Coffee, their forest of family trees continued to grow, branching out in unexpected directions, proving that sometimes the most beautiful gardens grow from the seeds of adversity. What would you do if you were in Veronica's position? How would you handle the delicate balance between protecting your children and allowing your community to grow? Your unique perspective matters. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear about your own experiences with family, community, and the power of unconditional love. If you resonated with this story of resilience and found value in its message about redefining family, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell to join our growing community of storytellers and changemakers. We bring you meaningful stories that touch hearts and challenge perspectives every day. This story reminds us that family comes in many forms, and every voice matters in spreading this message of acceptance. If you believe this story could inspire or comfort someone else, share it with your friends and family. Together, we can build a world where love knows no boundaries and every family story deserves to be heard.